to get started. It's good to see everybody here. I know it's been a very long day, but looks like people are hanging in, and I hope you've all had a really good conference so far. We're here this afternoon to talk about the Adoption Mentoring Partnership, which is a very exciting program that we have been launching here in the Pioneer Valley of Western Massachusetts. And I want to introduce the people on our panel today. We'll be talking about different aspects of the program, and then we've decided to allow at least half of our time for discussion with those of you in the audience. Okay? So I'll start here on my left is Renee Moss, who is the Director of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Hampshire County, one of our key partners. Jessica Robbins is also with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and she's a case manager who works directly with our matches of our children and mentors. Jen Dolan, kind of to her left, is Program Manager for the Adoption Research Program. And Quade French, on the left, is a graduate student in clinical psychology and coordinator of the research part of this. So I'm going to turn it over first to Renee.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here, and we're here for that 3 o'clock slump time, so hopefully we can make it lively. I'm here to just talk about how the program got started, and I have to say it was nothing, there wasn't much thought, it wasn't something that I had a burning desire to do for a long time, but the Amherst schools at one point invited agencies from the community to come to the schools because the schools were feeling that they were not meeting the needs of the kids at the school who were adopted. And I came because I'm part of the Human Services Network and was there and listened to the stories. And I was incredibly moved by the parents who told their stories. And this was, I thought the whole spirit of this event was one that was not, it wasn't that the schools were defensive about not meeting the needs of the kids, and it wasn't that the parents or the community who felt like the needs weren't being met were angry with the schools. It was really coming together to say, we need more help. And the story, the parents who spoke talked about how, well, first of all, the parents who spoke, I believe most of them, and one of the parents is actually here, but I believe most of the children they were talking about were children who were adopted at birth. I don't think that they were international adoptions. They were? Okay. But the stories were stories of kids were doing well through elementary school, and then they hit middle school, and suddenly the kids were facing school failure. They were running away. They were being self-destructive. They were just, exhibiting all these antisocial behaviors, and it was becoming more and more difficult to parent the children. And the schools weren't able to help them. The dropout rate from looking at the group of students who were at the Amherst schools who were adopted, their dropout rate was so much higher than the general dropout rate within the schools. And I run a mentoring program. That's what I've done for the last 25 years. But what I kept hearing the parents were saying that they would tell their children that they love them. And the response might be, I know you love me, but that's not good enough. You don't understand how this feels. You just don't understand how it feels to be adopted. You just can't understand that. And there was also a parent who had a biological child and an adoptive child. And so the adoptive child was, seeing this difference. And the thing that resounded with me, and again, going here knowing very little about adoption, was the resounding that I kept hearing was, you can't understand, you don't understand. And I know that's where perhaps mentoring could come in. And being here in Amherst, one of our resources is the university. And at the university are 25,000 undergrads. Now, so sitting there thinking, there must be some of these 25,000 students, there must be some of them who have been adopted. And wouldn't that be incredible to match these children with somebody who did understand, who had been through that, and who was further along in the process. I don't want to say on the other side of the process because, as we know, life's one long journey. The process keeps unfolding for all of us. So it occurred to me that this is something that we could do. It wasn't going to solve everybody's problem. It wasn't going to be the be-all, end-all, savior for everyone. But it was a little something we could do. This is where our expertise was. And then I talked to somebody who I knew at the university who told me about the Red Center, told me about Hal Bruggemann, and I called him, and he was more than thrilled about my phone call, really looking for a community partner. And we all got together. We invited the parents who had spoken. We invited the schools. Adoption Journeys was with us. And we all started envisioning and brainstorming and figuring out what this could look like. And was it really possible? Could we create this partnership? And we were all very excited about it. We all felt like we were on the same page. And lo and behold, we did create the partnership. We were able to get some initial funding to get it up and running. And I just have a very small part in this because there are other people here who really, once we created it, once we made this vision become a reality, it was taken over by the people who provided the direct service. So I guess that's my part in just getting a little kernel of an idea.
When did that start?
2 years ago.
Oh, right.
I believe it was about 2 years ago that meeting was held, I think in May, at the Amherst schools. And, I forgot to do my slides. And now I'll turn it over to Jen Dunley.
So, nice to have all of you here today. Thank you for being with us. I'm Jen Dolan. I'm the program manager for the Red Adoption Research Program. And I've been working in this capacity for about 1.5 years. And it's the first that I've worked as a professional in the adoption community. So this is still a relatively new field for me. And, having been in other professional communities, attending conferences, invariably there's a critical mass, people you get to know. And I have to say, the adoption community, I am learning that we're a great group of folks. We lead with our heart. And I think that's true for a lot of different communities, but I feel like there's this large critical mass of folks that lead with our heart. And that feels really good. And so it's really an honor for me to be part of this community. I am an adoptive mom. My son is 10. He's adopted from the Philippines. So I speak to you today as the program manager for the Red Adoption Research Program and also as an adoptive mom. So 2 identities. And our kids who are adopted, they also have 2 identities. They have their birth identity and they have their adoptive identity. And 2 very significant identities, and they have to figure out how they're going to navigate those 2 identities. And our kids, they don't always really know exactly what their birth identity is. My niece, she's adopted from Thailand, found on a golf course. We know very little. And so that's really an extra challenge, like, okay, what is my birth identity? And, how do you handle that? And which foot do you step forward with? Are you stepping forward with your birth identity, which is, particularly if it's an international identity, which is how you appear to everybody else, or are you stepping forward with your adoptive identity, which may be how you feel internally, and yet it's not how people are necessarily responding to you externally. And so how do you make sense of that? So my son, who's 10, my partner and I are both white. We have 2 biological kids, both white, and we love and adore him. And there's just, he's got the whole picture. He does the sports, he's got all the equipment, he's got the overnight, the whole bit. And he lives in this community, Amherst, good community, good schools, and so he's got, things are going good for him, and yet, in regards to 2 very significant areas, my son, he walks alone. He walks alone in regards to the fact that he's the only one in the family who's adopted. And as much research as I do, as much as I talk about it and talk to other people, and I don't know what it's like to be adopted. I just don't know. And I'm not a person of color. And particularly in our society, that's very significant. So in 2 areas, he's really off on his own. So I need to go outside of our home to find resources for him to support him. And so what he could really use is somebody who's a little older, who's adopted, and ideally somebody who shares the same racial background. So what could he use? Oh, mentor. Not necessarily therapy, you know, he's doing fine. But it would be great for him to have somebody who's a little bit older, who understands what it's like to be adopted, who understands what it's like to be a person of color. So he could really benefit from this program. So I'm going to ask that we hold that. And then I want to talk about adolescence. And we all know adolescence is a transition from childhood to adulthood. Can be very challenging sometimes. We've gone through it. We probably have our own memories, our own stories. Some kids get through it easier than others. So what I'd like to us to think about is if you can envision in the arcades those quarter machines where you put the quarter in and there's the little bar that pushes them out, and then you get the quarters all at the edge and you want them to drop down. Okay, it's getting this. And so the idea is you want those quarters to fall down, right? If you just put one more, if it gets pushed a little bit more, they'll drop out, right? And that's what you want. But I'm going to suggest for this scenario that the quarters represent our kids, adolescents, and we don't want them to drop out, okay? So quarter goes in, boom, slides down, they're in their adolescent years. And so this wall that pushes them out, I want to suggest are the risk factors. So everybody experiences some risk factors. So what are some risk factors that kids who are in their adolescent years, what's one? Who can give me an example?
Drugs.
Drugs, absolutely.
Alcohol, social pressure.
Alcohol, social pressure, absolutely. So they're getting pushed. Now some of these quarters, some of these kids, they're not going to get anywhere near the edge. They're going to be fine, right? But others, they're going to get pushed, they're going to get pushed, until eventually some of them drop off. So our kids who are adopted, they're getting pushed that much more, right? And kids who are transracially adopted, even more. Some of them, again, they're going to be fine, but others, that extra push, it's going to set them over the edge and they're going to drop out. Drop out of their lives, drop out of school, drop out of their families. Okay? And so we don't want that to happen. So we're going to put in protective factors, right? A wall to try and prevent that from happening. So there's kind of your classic, you know, you've got the community, you've got the schools, you've got the family, and friends. So the adoption mentoring program, it's based right here in Amherst, and we have kids in surrounding towns. So Amherst, pretty vibrant community, healthy community. We've got the schools, you know, there's all sorts of stuff in the papers, but overall Amherst schools are good. And I would suggest that kids who are adopted, it's a very meaningful and thoughtful process. So a child who is brought into an adoptive home is brought there and they're wanted. And friends, you know, they can be kind of hit or miss, I guess, with our kids. But what happens when you put those protective factors in place and you have this great community, a great school, great family, and they don't know anything about adoption? All right, those protective factors, it's not going to catch our kids. So we need something that is going to save them, to protect them, if you will. And so the adoption mentoring program can serve in that way. It can prevent them from getting to that point where they're going to drop out. That's our goal anyway. So that's my plan. So I'm very honored to turn it over to Hal Rodman, my colleague. Okay, my boss.
Partner in crime. So I want to talk just a little bit about the goals of the program, and I was struck by two things this morning that fit perfectly with what we're doing. One, I remember Mary Dozier was talking about layers of intervention and kind of nested interventions. And that's really what we have here. We don't consider this a clinical intervention because the children, by and large, are doing fine. They're in elementary school, things are moving along, but this is more of a preventive intervention. But the idea is that we have layers going on here. So we have things aimed at the children, but we also have aspects of the program focusing on the mentors, and we have aspects of the program focusing on the families as a whole. And then we also have our own group as our leadership group of people who are involved in the collaboration, and we support each other in terms of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So the idea of these nested interventions, I think, is a really important concept of what we're doing. The other thing we heard about this morning was Jen McDermott talking about the idea of social support. And that social support is really what helps that brain development, so kids who have that social support are able to have more support in service of the biopsychosocial aspects of what they're developing. So I think a lot of the grounding of what we're doing is very solid in terms of these concepts. Basically, the goals for the children are to provide this kind of preventive, promotive environment that Jen was talking about, so that they can move into these pre-adolescent and early adolescent years with that sense of safety and with a sense of also having a friend and a role model that they can look up to who looks like them to some degree, but who's also adopted and who gets it, somebody who understands it. Our goals, we also have goals for the mentors. Now you might think of the mentors as being, they're the adults in the situation, they're doing this, but they're undergraduate college students, and they're also on their own journey of understanding what adoption means. Some of them have given a lot of thought to adoption and to their own adoption. Others of them have really not thought about it a whole lot, and so it's turned out that being part of this program has been an intervention in their lives, and so we're there for them as well. And so you notice that one of our partners is the Psychological Services Center. So we have kind of fallback places at the PSC so that if our mentors, or really if anybody on our team needs the additional assistance, we have it provided there. And then for the families, we have the support from Adoption Journeys, which is the post-adoption services provider in Western Massachusetts through the public system. And they already have programs to support parents in a post-adoption way, and so we're working with them to kind of make some of those programs available for our families as well. So we've given a lot of thought to the kind of nesting of these different layers because they are all interconnected. But the goal, of course, is for the children. So the focus is really on the kids, but in order for that part of the system to work, all of the pieces have to work together. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jess, who's going to talk about the actual program, what we do.
Hi, thanks so much for coming out today to hear our presentation and to hear about this fabulous program. I have the extreme pleasure of getting to talk about the fun aspect, these actual matches that everyone here has worked so hard to create. And I have the privilege of getting to see these matches on a daily basis interact. So I really have the easy job here. So when we looked at how to make these matches, the first thing we really looked at, and this is coming from our Big Brothers Big Sisters perspective, is are these people going to get along? We did not want to just put two random individuals together. We really wanted the matches to be intentional. We wanted them to share interests, share personalities. So that's really what we looked at primarily when we were making the matches. Just like Jen said earlier, a lot of the parents involved in this program were very concerned about finding a mentor for their child who was same race or had the same adoption story. So that was a close second that we looked at. Overall, we're working with a very small pool of potential mentors and a very small pool of potential mentees. Somehow, and I don't really know how this happened, blind dumb luck, I guess, we were able to make incredibly similar matches. Our outcomes have been great. In 5 of the 6 matches we have matched currently, they shared the same adoption story, so whether they were adopted internationally, domestically, or from foster care. And 50% are same race matches, which is great. In one case, we were able to make a match between a mentor and a mentee where they're not only, they not only get along fabulously, but they're also same race, same adoption story, and they both have 2 moms, which that was a really, really fun call to make, to let these mothers know that we actually found a mentor for their child who also came from the same-sex family. So that was very, very cool. So who are these kids? The kids in our program range in age from 9 to 14. They come from all different socioeconomic backgrounds. They come from Hampshire County. Most are primarily in Amherst. And They are from international adoptions, domestic adoptions, and foster care adoptions. Some of the challenges in recruiting parents and kids for this program was really in finding them. How do you search out these individuals? And certainly there are disclosure policies at the schools that prevented guidance counselors from really saying, here, these are our adopted kids. And in some cases, that's not necessarily knowledge that the schools have. What has been fantastic about this partnership as a whole is that we've enjoyed such strong support from the Amherst School District. And so in many cases, we actually had guidance counselors who sort of, tipped parents off if they knew they were an adopted family. So that was great. As a whole, the Amherst School District has really embraced our program from the beginning. They were able to put information about the program in their newsletters, on their blogs. They sent, all 3 of the elementary schools in Amherst sent a flyer home with every single child who attended school there. So that's really how this program initially grew, was through word of mouth and from just kind of blanketing the schools in every way we could. That's not to say that everyone fully 100% embraced our program from the beginning, or that all parents thought it was a great idea from the start. Parents were extremely concerned with some aspects of the program. I would say their largest concern, and Jen touched on this a little bit, is will this mentor displace my role as the parent? Is this person going to become the person that my child talks to about adoption? And that was very concerning for many families, understandably. And so in that situation, Quaid and I really talked with the families about how this was a tool. This was not anything that would come in and sort of supplant their role as a parent. It was there to really be a tool. The parents were also very concerned whether the mentors would receive adequate training or the necessary support. This can be very triggering for college students who are maybe still processing their own adoption. So we wanted to make sure the parents knew that the mentors would be supported as well. In 3 cases, 3 of the kids involved in this program actually came off of our Big Brothers Big Sisters wait list. The kids had been on our wait list for between 3 and 5 years in each case. So it was really, really gratifying to be able to not only finally match those kids off our wait list, but to say to the parents, not only do we have a mentor in mind for your child, guess what, they're adopted. I mean, it was really, really phenomenal. So, and finally, we really used Adoption Journeys as a referral source as well. They really helped us out a lot there. So, the mentors. Again, our mentors come from all over New England. They run the gamut as far as race and socioeconomic status, whether they come from single parent or 2-parent families, a very diverse group. We recruited 1st and 2nd year students because although it's Big Brothers Big Sisters policy to make a match for 1 year, we all hoped that they would be able to commit for more than 1 year. So it made sense for us to find 1st and 2nd year students who could put in 2 or 3 years in a mentoring relationship with a child. So these are very, very different individuals, but the one very poignant thread that ran through all of these mentoring candidates was they really remembered what it was like to be 9 years old, what it was like to be 10 years old and come to a school event and have kids say, why don't you look like your parents? Or do you belong to that family? They really remember that. And at Big Brothers Big Sisters, we work a lot with college students. They're one of our main resources in finding mentors for kids in our program. And I love working with college students because they really have one foot in each world. They look cool and they dress cool and they know who Justin Bieber is, but at the same time they are really further along in their journey and they have that perspective. So it's just been a really, really fabulous group of both families and mentors to work with. We've been very, very lucky. So Big Brothers Big Sisters policy states that these bigs and littles will spend 3 to 5 hours a week together. They get together once a week. And we did have some parent pushback with that. A lot of parents said to us, that's a lot of time. You know, we have soccer, we have basketball, we have drama. I don't know if we can really put one more activity in place. So we, in our screening, we really did look for families who would fully embrace this, who would really see this as something helpful for their children and something that they could commit to. Interestingly enough, the mentors involved didn't blanch. They said 3 to 5 hours a week, that's great. Which was wonderful, because many of them are working students. They're involved in other extracurricular activities, so it was really, really great to get this motivated group of young people. We decided to keep that 3 to 5 hour policy in place for this program because we really believe at Big Brothers Big Sisters that's what it takes to build rapport, to build the relationship among the two parties. So what do? I mean, they do pretty typical things. They do things that are very typical of our larger program. They play Wii in the dorm rooms. The kids love eating in the cafeteria. They think it's the coolest thing in the world. They feed ducks at the duck pond. UMass is this fantastic resource for us in that it really provides a place for the kids to come with their mentor and just explore. And as an added bonus, the kids get exposure to the college campus. They get what it's like to live in a dorm, eat in a cafeteria, and attend classes. And for some of these kids who don't have parents who went to college, this is another fantastic added bonus of the program. Many of our mentors have vehicles, so in some cases they're able to go pick up the child from home and take them out into the community. So they go to, pet cats at the animal shelter, or they go to a corn maze. I mean, they're doing very, very typical activities of kids in our larger program. The other decision we made with this program was to really embrace these matches as part of our larger program. So we hold monthly events at Big Brothers Big Sisters, and our adoption matches are, of course, invited to attend those events. So we've really done our best to integrate them into the program and want them to feel like they're not only part of this very specialized group, but they're part of the larger community. So this is probably, when we talk to individuals about this program, the question we are asked most frequently is, what do these matches talk about? Is adoption coming up? And I am here to tell you that it doesn't really come up that often. They talk about school, they talk about friends, they talk about music, they talk about movies. They're not having these big, heartfelt talks about adoption, and we think that's A-okay. Our mentors have been trained. We talk to them all the time about how to deal with these questions, how to deal with difficult discussion topics that come up, and I feel very confident that any one of them would do a fantastic job. But the reality is that it just doesn't come up that often. They're not processing adoption with each other. They're having fun. They're doing typical kid stuff, which is great. And just to really illustrate that, this is one of my favorite stories to come out of this program, and it might not seem like a lot, but it's something that we're very, very proud of. Last semester, Big and Little Brother were driving in the Big's car. They were on their way somewhere, and the little brother turned to the Big Brother, apropos of nothing, and said, "Hey, you're adopted, right?" And the Big Brother said, "Yeah, I'm adopted." And being the very conscientious individual he is, he said, "Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to hear my adoption story?" And the little brother said, "No, just curious." And he kind of settled back in his chair, but his shoulders sort of relaxed and his face sort of relaxed, and he kind of had this little half smile on his face. And for us, that was a huge, huge moment in this program. Is just having a child know that there is somebody very similar to him out there in the world who has a very similar set of circumstances, and they're building this friendship, and that's enough for us. So, thank you.
Hi, so my name is Quite French. I'm a graduate student here. Happy to be talking to you about this program that we've all worked really hard at, and I'm happy to see so many people here willing to listen about it. I'm going to talk to you about two elements that I think really make this program strong, and that's going to be our support of the mentors themselves and the research component that's sort of built into this program also. First, those are them right there, Hal and I also. So those are the mentors that we have, and as you can see, they're a diverse group of kids. They sort of are a cross-section of adoption, right? International, domestic, private, domestic, foster, all different ethnicities represented. But as just mentioned, one of the things that they do care very much about, and all of them sort of share, is their desire to provide something for kids that they didn't have when they were growing up. That's probably one thing that in talking to them you'll hear, is that they didn't have the opportunity to have someone who looked like them and had the same story as them when they were younger, and that's really sort of driving their participation, I think. The mentors are recruited through various methods. And we talked about Facebook in some of the breakout sessions, so we did use Facebook. Each class has a Facebook page, and so we posted on there, sent out emails and everything. And in sort of conceptualizing the role of the mentor, we really wanted to do everything that we could to support them. The mentoring literature that is out there offers very little in the way of sort of understanding what the experience would be like for the mentors. And developmentally speaking, just as Jess said, they're very different. They're not 8 years old and thinking about their adoption. They're 18 and 19 and really starting to get into the heart of some of these challenging issues. And so we wanted to do everything we could to support them as they're starting to undertake that journey. Mentor group meetings. So this is how we sort of decided to go about supporting these mentors, is through the creation of mentor group meetings. The first part that's up there is didactic. And so what we provide for the mentors in these meetings, which are bi-weekly, are a series of readings on everything from mentoring, challenges of mentoring, to everything from adoption policy to identity development, to issues of race and ethnicity and adoption, domestic issues, international issues, really providing for many of them their first sort of exposure to the world of adoption research and literature. Aside from maybe a book that they received or read with their parents when they were very young, and a conversation that they had when they were very young also, these meetings really represented sort of, for many of them, the first time they'd actually talked or thought about their adoption themselves. We're asking them to participate in an adoption mentoring program, right, with these kids. So we had to anticipate that this would come up for them, and it did actually. So what we do is we have them do these readings. We have guest speakers come in, people from Adoption Journeys, Post-Adoption Services, professors, researchers, like from the Department of Children and Family Services, all sort of different aspects of the adoption community. We try and pull in these resources to talk to these mentors about it. And then we sort of let them process. We let them discuss these issues sort of as the theories that they are, but also sort of allow them to relate them to their own adoption stories, and then also ask them to think about what it might be like for their littles, when their littles are sort of thinking about these things also. So that's really one of the huge strengths of this program, I think. And so that really, I think that's and then support. So not only do the mentors have the ability to have access to these readings and these guest speakers, but for many of them, coming to these meetings and being a part of this program connected them to an adoption community on campus that they did not know existed. Some of the mentors said that they didn't know any other adopted people in this campus of 25,000 students. And so it's really something that, I feel like we did a really good job in connecting these kids together. And it turns out that some of them are in the same dorms and in the same classes, and so they just, every time they get together and learn more about each other, they're starting to sort of build those connections on a different level. And in continuing to support each other, one of the first things that we asked the mentors to do when they came in is to share their own adoption story. And that really was, for many of them, the first time that they had told anyone really about their adoption story, other than family members and things. And that was, for me, a really touching moment in this program. I'm adopted myself, and so I was able to share my story with them and sort of talk to them about what their thoughts are and questions and things they have. And as was mentioned before, a lot of the mentors are at different stages in thinking about their adoption, and some have thought about it a lot. Some have started to make contact, and some Not at all. And others started the process of contacting birth parents as sort of as a function of participation in this program. That they started the process, once they sort of had access to the literature and realized that it was something that was okay to do. That was okay for adopted kids to do. So, okay. So this is just to give you a little flavor of some of the perspectives of the mentors, and I'll read it for going back. I can't see. They said, "I hope in the end my little will see me as a friend she can always talk to, even after this year. Even though we don't talk about adoption, I hope one day when she thinks back to this program, she will think what her adoption meant to her when she was 11 years old. I've really started to think about who I am as an adopted person and how adoption plays into it. I hope she will want to be a friend to someone like I am to her." And then another one. The most valuable part that I will be taking away from this experience is how I was able to reflect upon my childhood and see a little of me in my mentee. This experience has allowed me to realize that sometimes you just have to relax and breathe and enjoy life for what it is. And I'm extremely thankful for being able to participate in this program, for it has allowed me to both teach as well as learn. So for me, these two quotes really sort of capture why we're doing what we're doing. Okay, so the other component of this program that I think really gives it strength is sort of the research aspect. And we've been working on developing the program for a couple of years now, but the research has only just begun. So I can really only get into some of the methodology. But the mentor quotes did give you some sense of sort of what's happening as a part of this process. So we wanted to look at sort of the effect of this program on all three groups, on the mentors, on the children, and their parents and families. In looking at the mentors, we were specifically concerned with change in their perceptions and conceptualizations about their adoption and what it meant to them. And in doing that, we have a number of interviews and measures that we use, such as the self-liking and self-concept scale. That was Taffaroti and Swan, I think. And then like the MEIM, multi-group ethnic identity measure as well. And in order to sort of track change as a function of participation in this program, we really tried hard to recruit a comparison group of college-age adopted kids who weren't participating in this program, to really see if we could isolate the effects of participation in this program and not just sort of the more global effects of coming to a diverse campus and being away from home and sort of the more age-appropriate developmental things that might be going on. So we'll let you know what happens when we find out. As far as the children go, we were, really, and as Hal mentioned, in a number of them mentioned, it's really a preventative sort of intervention that we're trying to do. One of the things that we did notice when we were recruiting children is a lot of the parents were saying, well, my kid doesn't have problems, so why does he need a mentor, or she need a mentor? And so that sort of really was another challenge that I think was pretty large. But in the children that we were able to recruit, we were giving them a strength of relationship survey, which is a standard Big Brothers measure, actually, to see how the children are functioning and whether they like the person that they're matched with and they like participating in these, in their outings and whatnot. And then also the harder self-perception profile for children, just to sort of see if we can track any sort of change in how they understand themselves or view themselves. And then for the parents, looking at a CBCL to sort of track behavioral things, but like I said, many of the parents don't perceive problems in their children at this age. But probably the most valuable data collection from the parents will be through an interview. So we're going to be doing, it's the child behavior checklist, and it's part of the Achenbach behavioral scales. So there's a youth self-report, there's a parent report, which is the CBCL, and there's also a teacher report. So we're giving them the parent report portion of this. Sorry about that. But probably the best source of information is going to be from the interviews. So Jess and I are going to go around and do exit interviews, sort of end of year interviews, and really try and get a sense of parents' perceptions of, like she said, the time commitments and everything like that, as well as how they think their kids are doing in the program. All right, I'm going to pass it over to him.
I just have to share one more story of a really fun example of the dedication of our mentors. We have all of our mentors started with us during fall semester. but one of the mentors went on a study abroad this spring to Australia, right? And so we were a little bit concerned because, to match somebody with a big and a little, and then all of a sudden they're going, out of the country. So actually they have been Skyping. So they've been using Skype to stay in touch, and the mentor is on his way back from Australia, and they're going to pick up where they left
That's
off
great.
and keep going. So, using technology is going to be, I think, really helpful for us. So just very quickly, the story so far, as you can tell, we do have 6 matches that we've completed, and all of the mentors and the adoptees were matched on gender and mostly on ethnicity as well. We're currently recruiting for more mentors, and I think we have 4, is that right, identified, and we're looking for more. And if you walk around campus, you'll see some signs posted in various places. We're also recruiting in the dormitory cafeterias, and we have little signs there, so we're getting the word out. And we actually have a wait list of children from the community who want to be, whose parents have identified them. Our challenges, one is funding to sustain the program, because a lot of funding agencies like to fund the beginning of new programs. But of course, one of the things they always say is you have to show how you're going to be self-supporting. So we do have some wonderful kind of ramp-up funding, and I'll mention that in just a minute. But the funding to sustain I think will be a continuing challenge. But both the Big Brothers Big Sisters and the RUD program have put significant kind of in-kind resources from our existing staff to really make this happen, because we just believe in it. We just think it's a really worthwhile thing to be doing. In terms of the research component, it may take us several cohorts or several years in order to have enough participants to really be able to do quantitative analyses. And so that's why we're relying on some of our interview information and some of the quotes and things that you saw here today to give us a feel for how it's going. And one of the other challenges is that there is this huge interest in the community, but finding the mentors is challenging and very time consuming. Where Jen especially has gone, how many classes did you go?
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
Right, and
A lot.
talked to thousands of undergraduates anyway. But we also have a lot of strengths. I think this really has the potential to be a powerful preventive intervention for these children. And the benefits, as I said, it's a connected intervention. So the benefits will hopefully accrue to the children and the mentors and the families. And the other kind of side benefit is that it's increasing awareness of adoption in the community. Just in general, people are becoming aware that there is this program that it's like, oh, tell me more about adoption. It's just kind of increasing the visibility of adoption and the needs of adopted children in our community. And so we especially want to thank all of our dedicated mentors, our mentees, our families, our partners, and our funding partners are currently the RUD program and the Community Foundation of Western Massachusetts and the Beveridge Family Foundation. So we especially appreciate all of their support. So we have now a half an hour for discussion. So I'd just like to turn it basically over to you. I'm going to sit down. We have mics here, and just feel free to direct your questions to whoever you would like to, or to the whole panel.
When are you gonna spread out of Amherst down to like where I live?
We get more mentors.
Well, actually, I think through the Big Brothers Big Sisters network, we're hoping to be able to talk about it, and we're hoping that other Big Brother Big Sister programs will want to replicate it.
So each Big Brother Big Sister program is like individually owned and operated?
Correct.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Mhm.
As a whole, I see. Okay.
So, we're just looking, we wanted to see it through its first year, and then we want to really try to,
So it's like the model.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll pick it up. Right, okay.
One of the other things, because we're in the Pioneer Valley and there are 5 colleges here that are very close, is that we've actually had a lot of growing interest from students, at Hampshire College and other places who would like to participate. So at this point, I think, we've been having discussions about how the best way logistically to sort of expand this program to other, potential mentors at colleges. So that might be the next step. Yeah.
Let me just add, I actually had a call, no, we didn't need this. I actually had a call from somebody from Wisconsin last year. She saw something in our annual report about it, and she was really very excited. So we're in touch, and so hoping to expand geographically significantly.
My name's Erica, and I work at Mount Holyoke actually. So I am very interested in finding a way to collaborate with your program. And I was adopted at a young age myself, so I think that role modeling is very, very important. And so, do you have an idea of like when you might be putting something a little bit more solid in place for the 5 colleges?
I don't know, I shouldn't speak out of turn, but I would think we could do it yesterday. You know, there's cooperation between the 5 colleges. What I just said, I just asked Jen before, how many kids are on our waiting list for this particular project? And there's 20 kids waiting in Hampshire County. So that's without even going beyond Hampshire County, right in our own county. And I would think we would be very open to it. I would also, you know, think we might want to entertain the idea of going into the community, that the mentors don't even necessarily have to be students, but could be people in the community. So we definitely should talk.
And then my other question is, you know, just in terms of if there are international adoptions, have you given any thought to working with international students who maybe not adopted but could like come in and maybe talk about culture, so they could get as part of the program structure as well, so that maybe they're not their primary mentor, but they are available to kind of address certain cultural or ethnic issues?
Right, and that's a great idea too. You know, in really developing this program, there are programs out there that are more focused on culture. You know, there are culture camps for adopted kids, and there are mentoring programs, I use some out in Boston, that do focus on culture, right? And so we really considered that, and we really think that one of the strengths is in matching an adopted child with an adopted mentor, almost more so than that other aspect. But you know, at the same time, we don't, you know, discourage the mentors from doing activities that involve culture. But that's a great idea to sort of incorporate more of the cultural community at UMass to see if they can support it also.
So I have
sort of on the
Way in
same
the back.
I think you have a room full of foot people, I guess they're called. Because I'm connected to Wesleyan University, which is what they call college exchange. But also I live in the New York area, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to do something. I mean, you mentioned Wisconsin, but you know, Rutgers or Princeton or something down there. I mean, how friendly are you?
Very friendly.
How much money do you have?
Right. You know, this summer, you know, we're really going to be working on sort of getting everything that we've done, because I mean, this has really been sort of a work in progress up till this point. And so this summer, I know we're really going to work hard in developing more of a written sort of account of the steps and the challenges and sort of things to watch out for and things to make sure you consider in developing programs like this. So I think at that point, we'd probably be in a better position to really sort of collaborate and have solid materials rather than like handfuls of random forms that, you know, we currently work from. So, you know, definitely, you know, contact information, and we'll definitely be in touch.
So I have a question about just the expanding out to the 5 colleges. I'm curious, I know I'm from the University of Minnesota, and I know that we have almost an equal number of undergraduates as we do graduate students. Have you considered going to graduate students, or, you know, recruiting from graduate students as well? And the reason I ask is because I'm guessing as you do, you know, and in any kind of program development, that it's a lot easier to work out all the kinks and the issues in a more, when you have closer proximity before expanding.
Yeah, I think we'd be very open to that. I mean, at this point, we don't have graduate students who are serving as mentors, but I think what we were trying to do is make sure that they would be here long enough. So part of it was thinking, okay, if they're a graduate student, if they're going to be launching into a big like clinical practicum or an internship that's going to take them away. So we're trying to figure out what the right timing spot is.
Sure.
But I think it'd be very possible to have graduate students as part of it too.
Yeah, and I also think with graduate students, they tend to be here through the summer.
Yeah.
So that's even,
Yeah,
in some
exactly.
ways that's even better. Yeah.
Sure.
Great idea.
You know, another added component to the undergraduates was for them to get together on a regular basis was really important to us. And so we could offer a course. They are getting course credit for being involved in this program. So they are required to come together every other week and to talk about, to get the academic component to this. And so it was kind of easy with the undergraduate program.
Sure.
But, that doesn't include the graduate students.
Right.
Yeah.
Hi. My interest, because of working in post-adoption, is the kids, and not so much the mentees at this point, but the mentors. And you had mentioned that, about where they're at in their own exploration of their adoption story, and that, what this prompted from them. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about what their experiences have been coming into contact, working with somebody where, they might see themselves, or it might bring up something for them that wasn't there before. You said some of them had started their search.
Right.
Which, that was another thing I was curious about. If you had feedback from their families about what it's like to have a child who's away from home for the first time maybe, who's now starting to explore their adoption story and potentially doing a birth parent search.
And I'd like to acknowledge that this is Deb Estelle, who is at Adoption Journeys and one of our key partners in this project.
Thanks.
Right. So mentor development, right?
Mentor development.
Right. And the creation of the mentor group meetings, that provides them with the literature and access to discussion with other adoption or other adopted individuals, really has sort of been a catalyst for that. They participate with their littles, and they know they're both adopted, but like it was said, they don't really talk about adoption much, but it's clear that there are, that the mentors do see some of themselves in this young person that they're working with. And that, in conjunction with the readings and the guest speakers and the discussions that they've been able to have on a very personal level. I mean, the very first meeting we had, we all shared our adoption stories. So from the get-go, they were sort of aware that everyone's story was different, and also very personal. And that they started out from varying levels of discussion. Some never talked to their parents at all about adoption. A lot of them don't even remember being told. International adoptions, it can sort of be, it's like, oh, well, you don't look like us, so you're adopted, So we sort of ran into that too. But a lot of it's been just personal sort of development and thought too. So participating in meetings and then going home and thinking about it. As part of the research, we conduct interviews about adoption that were interviews were developed as part of the Minnesota-Texas Adoption Research Project, and that's been going on for a number of years. And it really sort of taps into communication around adoption with family members and their own thoughts about their adoption and how they see it influencing their lives and being a part of their lives. And we've done the initial interviews, and it's clear, and from what they've said, that a lot of them haven't done a lot of thinking about it, and they didn't do it in the past. So the final interviews are coming up actually in the next few weeks, so I'm very excited to see what sort of changes have sort of come about as a function of that. But it's clear, we had them do end of the semester and a fall semester sort of little summaries and write-ups, and that's where those quotes came from. So we weren't even asking them really pointed questions about identity development or understanding adoption, and they came out with it. So it's clear that it's something that's very, very salient to them at this time. Did that?
Yeah.
Nice.
Have you had any feedback about the search from
the
either
search.
their families or
Right.
themselves?
So the search, that was one particular mentor who told me that he had started the search process while he was a mentor, and I haven't heard anything else. The last I heard was that he had gotten the forms from the agency, but that in itself was a huge step.
And Court, you'll have to tell me if I'm remembering correctly. It seems like there was one mentor that after many of the sessions, she would call her mom and talk about what she had learned or what they had talked about in class.
Yeah.
So really a lot more processing going on with her adopted mom.
We had met one mentor come back from the winter break and say it was the first time she had talked with her mom about adoption in 15 years. And I think a lot of that came up because when we asked them to share their adoption stories, she realized she had some holes. She didn't have all the details, and she wanted clarifying information. So she said it ended up being a really, really lovely conversation between her and her mom. So it's pretty phenomenal.
Powerful. A lot of collateral.
In terms of the idea of prevention, I wonder, or using this as an intervention, a preventative intervention, do you have any idea of bringing the parents of the mentees together? And this goes back to the sort of ambivalence, that's a cultural ambivalence, and it's among individual parents as well of adopted kids, where on the one hand you try to normalize the child to the, and on the other hand you know that the reality is that the child is adopted, and the child should know that the child is adopted, and there's this sort of tension and that gets translated or transferred to the child and the child's own sense of identity. And I just wonder if having the parents of the kids, the mentees, brought together in some way would be helpful in sustaining some sense that this is an ongoing issue for the family. At least that's certainly something that was very salient in the adoption group that I'm a part of that got you poor guys going on this. I apologize in advance for. So I just wonder if that's been a thought that you've had about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've absolutely thought about that, and it's something that we are planning to do at the end. We're still shaping it, but the parents that we've talked to when we do our monthly check-ins, we ask, is this something you'd be interested in? And they're all very curious to meet one another, and if you know, a sort of, I don't want to call it a support group, but if a community forms around this, that's absolutely something we'd support. Right now we sort of have plans to do sort of like a barbecue at the end of the school year to bring together the kids. That's another thing, is that the kids are actually really, really interested in meeting each other. They want to feel each, you know, they want to see it. And we have one mentee who asks almost every time she's with her big sister, you know, so there's other people like us? There's other kids doing this too? What are they doing? What are they like? So I think it would be just really valuable to bring together not only the families to talk, but also the kids and the mentors. Because in a lot of ways they are, you know, the mentors have this very strong partnership, and they've really formed this cohort, and they've really, I mean, I wouldn't even hesitate to say they've formed very powerful friendships through this. But I think it could definitely benefit from bringing together this whole little community we've created. Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, have you thought about getting information on the adoptive parents' feelings, the adoptive parents of the mentors? Because as you said, a lot of adoptive mentors come into this maybe not 100% with their adoptive identity, and it develops over time, and I imagine as that develops, what are their parents feeling, and so is it causing fear in them or anything like that?
Yeah.
Well, we thought about that at the beginning, and actually as I recall, we did inquire of our mentors about their parents and what they think, you know. But of course, they're all over 18, and we didn't want to make it seem like they could only be in the program if they felt their parents approved or something. But part of this process has been helping them think through, you know, their relationships with their parents and how that might be. Now, we haven't actually thought about, you know, contacting their parents. That would be an interesting kind of piece of this, to see what that might be like, and I'm sure that the level of disclosure has been different. But again, many of the mentors have talked about the fact that they're talking more with their adopted parents now than they ever did. So,
And,
You know,
oh,
I was going to comment, that might actually be really interesting for the mentee to see the mentor in their family circle at the barbecue.
well,
Cool.
Yeah, we actually did have one situation where, and this is just going back to how these communities are being created. The pair I spoke about, where they both have two moms.
Yeah.
They're actually part of the same Guatemalan. There's a larger community of Guatemalan adoptees in Massachusetts, and they were actually been in the same network for years. and have met at conferences and even traveled to Guatemala together last summer. And so, you know, it's kind of cool. There is some overlap happening. Not in all of the matches, but in that one in particular.
Little networking.
Yeah, it's been really interesting.
Yeah, support going on there. That's great.
Yeah.
Yes, I just had a question again, going back to just the implications, the ripple effects across the whole adoptive network or the AKN. I'm curious how many of these of your matches, how many of them are in open versus closed adoptions, and then is there any contact at all? I mean, with the birth parents, you're saying that they're talking more with their adoptive parents. It would be really interesting to see if you also see changes within the kinship network.
So right now there's only one out of the 6 mentors who has contact with their birth family.
Yeah. Because is that because they're primarily international?
Yeah,
Yeah.
The individual that does was adopted through foster care, and he actually made contact with his birth family before starting this program. That was something that he did, you know, when he was younger, and he established good relationships with them and everything. So for him, that aspect hasn't changed a whole lot. But you know, as we know from that, the other mentor who, you know, is making steps to get paperwork, you know, which is huge, and do all that. I mean, it would be really interesting to see. You know, part of the interview does ask their thoughts about making contact, and if that would change in the future, if they're not thinking now, and all that. Yeah, you know the interview, right? Yeah. So I'd be interested to see if anything's changed since the first one.
Yeah.
Any of the mentees in open adoptions?
Oh, yeah, good question.
We have 2 mentees who are not in direct contact with their birth families, but whose parents are in direct contact with the birth families. So both families made the decision to sort of regulate that contact. So they sort of act as a conduit between, so provide pictures and letters and those sorts of things. But the mentees don't have direct contact with their birth families at this time.
Yes, a load of questions. We've had this conversation before. There's a group of several thousand kids who are in custody here in the department that don't have access to this type of support network, and that's including the mentors in addition to the university. And I think we've had this conversation. There's a whole almost untapped group of families, kids, possible mentors that. How that would be implemented, I have no idea, given the numbers in different offices throughout the state. But there's this whole support network that kids and families and the agency I work for doesn't have. So I don't know if there's any way of tapping in or making some contact with the different offices in the region, because the foundation here is all these excellent resources that that department doesn't have, and access to resources that our department doesn't have.
Well, I think that's exactly where we need these partners to be helping us think about how that might work. You know, one thing that we are involved in is the Re-envisioning Foster Care Initiative that's with the Treehouse Foundation, but also with the department. And so partly what we're thinking about with DCF is about issues of permanence and issues of, you know, prevention of children aging out of foster care, things like that. And so I hope what we can evolve as we get to know each other better in terms of how these things might work. You know, part of it is figuring out the mechanism, what might it actually look like and how might it actually work. But we're very open to that, and we are keenly aware of this large number of children who need, you know, these kinds of, who could benefit from these kind of services. So we should keep talking.
And this isn't directly pertaining to the Adoption Mentoring Partnership, but every year at Big Brothers Big Sisters, we do have a number of children who are removed into foster care. That happens frequently in our program, with our larger program. And I have to say, when the kids have a big brother or a big sister involved with them before that removal takes place, and the big is able to continue contact with the child over their course of stay in foster care, whether it's long-term or short-term, it's so invaluable to the child just to retain that constancy in that person, because it can be, as you well know and have taught us, it can be an incredibly jarring, incredibly traumatic experience. So, so I think it's a really, really interesting point.
It's kind of like that surrogate, you know, that bridge between all the different transitions.
Right,
It is
exactly,
one- yeah.
consistent presence in their life.
You know, I used to run health education, I ran peer leadership programs and, you know, did the research on peer leadership. And one of the things that we found that sometimes there was the ripple effect when you had the older kids helping the younger kids. And this was, you know, like high school kids helping the middle school kids. But what we did find consistently was that the peer mentoring, it was always great for the peers. So when you're talking about kids who are aging out of foster care, for those kids to be mentors to kids who are still in foster care, I mean, how cool would that be for those older kids in addition to the younger kids? And I think we're seeing the same thing with the adoption mentoring program. I mean, our focus is on the younger kids, but it's really powerful for our mentors as well.
Other questions? All right. Well, thank you all for coming.